You're just his past. That's what my daughter-in-law Chloe told me. She said it with a practiced, polished smile, but her eyes were brimming with a casual sort of poison. She might as well have been flicking a piece of lint off my shoulder, an inconvenience, a relic, an insignificant footnote in the grand story of the life she was building with my son Mark. What she failed to understand is that the past, especially when underestimated, can be dangerously lucid and practical. That same night, after driving home with her words echoing in the quiet hum of the car engine, I didn't cry. I didn't call my friends to vent or pour a glass of wine to numb the sting. I walked into my study, sat in the leather chair my late husband Richard had spent most of his evenings in, and I picked up my phone. I opened the banking app. With a few deliberate taps, I navigated to the joint account, their account, the one I had set up for them after their wedding, the one I had poured my savings into to give them a head start, the one where I was, critically, still the primary account holder. I found the option I was looking for, freeze account. The app asked for confirmation. Are you sure? This action will block all transactions. I was sure. One final, silent click, cold, fast, and absolute. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of clarity. For years I had helped, funded, and silenced myself for the sake of their happiness. I was the constant presence when my son was struggling, the financial backstop when their ambitions outpaced their income, the free babysitter for my grandson Leo. I was the reliable, sturdy foundation they never had to think about. But to her, to Chloe, I was just an inconvenient remnant of a time before her, an old story to be shelved. Well, I decided it was time to show them the actual weight of being just the past. This is the story of how one cruel sentence became the catalyst for an inevitable shift. It's the story of how I refused to be erased for convenience. It's about how sometimes respect isn't given, it's reclaimed with firm boundaries and frozen bank statements. Because this was never about the money, it was about memory, presence, and everything I had built so they could even dream of having a future. And if I'm the past, then they were about to learn a very hard lesson. The past built every single thing they had. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. And if you feel a connection to stories about finding your strength, consider subscribing to the channel. Our story, or rather their story, funded by me, began like many modern fairy tales. Mark, my only son, met Chloe in his late 20s. He was brilliant but unfocused, a dreamer with a dozen half-finished projects. Chloe was ambitious, polished, and knew exactly what she wanted. In many ways I thought she was good for him. She gave him direction. They fell in love, and I was genuinely happy for them. Richard had passed away a few years prior, and seeing Mark build a life for himself was my greatest joy. When they decided to get married, I knew they were struggling financially. Mark was working a junior-level marketing job, and Chloe was a receptionist at a high-end salon, though she spoke of it as if she were managing the place. They had dreams of a beautiful wedding and a home in a nice, leafy suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. I wanted them to have that. Richard and I had worked tirelessly, building a successful construction business from the ground up. We hadn't had a fancy start. We lived in a tiny apartment for years, saving every penny. I wanted my son to have it easier, so I offered to help. Help became the down payment on their 4-bedroom colonial house, a house far bigger than they needed, but Chloe had her heart set on it. "We need room to grow, Helen," she'd said, gliding her hand over the marble countertop in the show home. I signed the check. Then Mark decided he needed an MBA to advance his career. It was a good idea, but the tuition at Duke was astronomical. He was hesitant to take on the loans. "Don't worry about it," I told him. "Consider it an investment in your future. Your father would have been so proud." I liquidated some stocks. Over the years, the help became a constant flowing river. I paid for the European vacation they took for their anniversary. I covered the bill when the transmission on their SUV failed. I set up a trust for my grandson, Leo, the day he was born, but I also paid for his expensive preschool, his organic meals, and the endless stream of toys that filled their oversized house, and I did it all gladly. This was my family. This was my legacy. The dismissiveness from Chloe started subtly. It was in the little things. If I told a story about Mark's childhood, she would smile tightly and change the subject. "Oh, Helen, you've told that one before." If I brought over a home-cooked meal, she'd thank me, but I'd later see the untouched container in the back of their fridge when I came to babysit. She started calling me Helen instead of Mum, which was fine, but the way she said it felt like a correction. Mark, caught in the middle, noticed nothing, or if he did, he chose to ignore it. He loved his wife, and he loved me, and in his mind our worlds were perfectly harmonious. He didn't see the way Chloe's friends would give me a pitying look when I'd show up in my practical jeans and comfortable shoes, while they were all dressed in designer labels I'd inadvertently paid for. The breaking point, the moment that led to the click, happened last Tuesday. It was Leo's 5th birthday. I'd arrived at their house, arms full of presents, including a handcrafted wooden rocking horse from a local artisan that had cost a small fortune. It was something I imagined Leo passing down to his own children one day. I found them in the kitchen. Chloe was directing a catering team, her voice sharp and commanding. Mark was on his phone, nodding along to whatever she said. I set the gifts down. "Happy birthday, my sweet boy," I said, hugging Leo. Later, as guests mingled in the backyard, I was talking to one of Mark's old college friends. I mentioned how Mark used to be terrified of horses until his dad put him on a pony at the state fair. It was a sweet memory. Chloe overheard as she walked by with a tray of champagne flutes. She paused, placing the tray down with a clatter. "Helen, can I speak to you for a moment?" she asked, her voice dangerously sweet. She led me to the far side of the perfectly manicured garden, away from the guests. "I need you to stop," she said, her smile never faltering. I was confused. "Stop what, dear?" "The stories, the constant reminders of how things used to be. Mark and I are building a life here, our life, with our traditions, our memories." I was taken aback. "I was just reminiscing." "That's the point," she cut in, her voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "It's all you ever do. You live in the past. You need to understand something. That life, the one with the state fairs and the pony rides, that was his life before me." She leaned in a little closer, the scent of her expensive perfume suffocating. "You're just his past. We are his future, and the future doesn't need constant ghosts at the table." I looked at her, truly looked at her, the sheer, unadulterated entitlement, the audacity. I felt a sudden, strange calm settle over me. I glanced over her shoulder and saw my son Mark standing by the grill. He had seen us talking, he had seen the look on my face, and he turned away, busying himself by flipping burgers. His silence was his answer. It was his endorsement. I didn't say another word to Chloe. I just nodded slowly. I found Leo, gave him one last hug, and quietly left the party. On the drive home, her words didn't just echo, they crystallized. "You're just his past." She wasn't just being cruel. She was stating what she believed to be a fact. In her mind, I was a resource that had been fully tapped, a foundation that could now be paved over and forgotten. And so, sitting in my husband's chair, the quiet house a testament to a past she so desperately wanted to erase, I picked up my phone. I wasn't a ghost. I was the bank, and the bank was about to close. Click. The next morning, I woke up with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years, a complete lack of obligation. I didn't check my phone for a text from Mark or Chloe asking if I could watch Leo. I didn't think about what bills of theirs might be due. I made myself a pot of coffee, sat on my back porch overlooking the garden Richard and I had planted together, and I read a novel. The silence was profound. It was the silence of a boundary finally drawn. I knew the storm was coming. Their entire lifestyle was a performance, and I had just cut the funding. The automatic mortgage payment was scheduled to come out of that account in 2 days. Their car payments, their platinum credit card bills, their weekly Whole Foods delivery, all tied to that single, now frozen source. The call came at 3:15 p.m. The caller ID showed Mark. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a slow, deliberate sip of my iced tea. "Hello," I said, my voice even. "Mum? Hey." A weird question. he started, his voice strained with false casualness. Is something wrong with the bank? I was just trying to buy groceries and my card was declined. I stayed silent for a beat. Was it? Yeah, and Chloe tried her card, and it was declined too. It was really embarrassing, Mum. The cashier was looking at us. People in line were sighing. I called the bank from the car and they said there's a security freeze on the account. They said the primary account holder has to call to remove it. That's you. Did you get some kind of fraud alert? There it was, the perfect off-ramp he was offering me. I could have said yes. I could have pretended it was all a misunderstanding, a technical error. I could have made a quick call and restored the fantasy. The old me would have, but the old me had been dismissed as the past. There's no fraud, Mark, I said calmly. I froze the account. Silence on his end. I could practically hear the gears in his head grinding, unable to process the statement. You? What? Why would you do that? Your wife was kind enough to clarify my position in your lives yesterday, I explained, my voice remaining perfectly level. I'm just the past. I decided it was inappropriate for the past to be financing the present. Mum, what are you talking about? His voice was rising, a mix of panic and indignation. Chloe said you two had a little chat, that's all. You can't just cut us off. The mortgage is due Friday. Yes, I know. I'm the one who set up the automatic payments, remember? I said. And it wasn't a little chat. It was a declaration, and your silence was your agreement. You and Chloe are the future. So, it's time for the future to stand on its own 2 feet. I could hear Chloe's voice in the background, sharp and furious. What is she saying? Let me talk to her. Mark mumbled something to her, then came back on the line, his tone shifting from panic to angry. This is insane. It's our money too. I have my paycheck direct deposited in there, and you're free to reroute your paycheck to any bank you'd like, I replied smoothly. As for the money in the account, I'd be happy to have my lawyer calculate exactly what percentage came from your paychecks over the last 5 years versus what came from my savings and investments. I suspect you won't like the math. He was sputtering now. This is a ridiculous overreaction. Chloe was just stressed about the party. You know how she gets. You're going to ruin our credit. You're going to destroy us over one stupid comment. One stupid comment was the symptom, Mark. The disease is a profound lack of respect that I have allowed to fester for far too long. I am not destroying you. I am simply withdrawing my support. There's a difference. Chloe snatched the phone from him. Helen, you listen to me, she hissed. This is a petty, manipulative power trip. You've always been controlling, always holding your money over our heads, and this proves it. You turn that account back on right now. Goodbye, Chloe, I said, and I hung up the phone. My hand was perfectly steady. The storm had made landfall, and I was still standing. They thought this was about power. They didn't understand it was about self-preservation. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar where you had to draw a hard line? Comment below, and don't forget to leave a like if you're following along. For the next 2 days, my phone was a barrage of texts. First from Mark pleading, Mum, please, let's just talk about this. Don't do this to us. Think about Leo. Then from Chloe, threatening, you'll regret this. I'll make sure Mark never speaks to you again. You'll never see your grandson. I read them all and I deleted them without replying. Using my grandson as a bargaining chip was a new low, even for her. It only solidified my resolve. My love for Leo was unconditional, but it was not a currency to be used to buy my submission. On Friday, the day the mortgage was due, I received a frantic call from Mark in the early afternoon. They're going to charge us a late fee, Mum. It's going to hit our credit score. Chloe had to cancel her hair appointment. She's furious. We don't have enough in our separate checking accounts to cover this. Please, I'm begging you, just for the mortgage. We can talk about everything else later. The time for talking was Tuesday night, Mark, I said, repeating myself. When you stood there and watched your wife attempt to erase me from your life, this is the consequence of that moment. You two need to figure it out. I hung up. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever had to do. The maternal instinct to rescue my child was screaming inside me, but the woman who had been dismissed and disrespected knew that rescuing him now would only teach him that my boundaries were meaningless. He needed to feel the weight of his own choices, of his own silence. He needed to decide which was more important, his mother's dignity or his wife's comfort. A week passed, a week of silence on my part and escalating panic on theirs. The late fee on the mortgage was just the beginning. I knew their budget, or lack thereof. Without my constant cash infusions, their carefully constructed world began to crumble in small, telling ways. Mark called me again the following Wednesday. His tone was different. The anger was gone, replaced by a weary, hollowed-out exhaustion. Chloe tried to get a personal loan to cover us until my next paycheck, he said, his voice flat. The bank turned her down. They said our debt-to-income ratio is too high without the other funds. I see, I said simply. She had to return the designer dress she bought for a gala next month. She cried for 2 hours. He sighed, a heavy rattling sound. We've been arguing, non-stop. She blames you for everything, says you're trying to break us up. And what do you say, Mark? I asked gently. There was a long pause. I don't know what to say anymore. At first I was angry at you, but now I'm just tired. Everything feels so fragile. I didn't realize how fragile it all was. This was the first crack, the first glimmer of understanding. He wasn't just seeing the financial hole, he was seeing the structural weakness of his own life. I'm not trying to break you up, I said softly. It wasn't built on your salary or Chloe's ambitions. It was built on Richard's hard work and my love. And Chloe didn't just disrespect me, Mark. She disrespected his memory. She dismissed everything we sacrificed to give you the opportunities you've had. I told him I was coming over, not to fight, but to talk. And I had one condition. Chloe had to be there, and she had to listen. He agreed, his voice barely a whisper. When I arrived at their house, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The usually immaculate home felt cluttered and stressed. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, her arms crossed tightly, her face pale and defiant. She wouldn't look at me. Mark stood by the fireplace, looking like a man caught between two warring nations. I didn't sit down. I stood in the center of the living room, the room I had paid the down payment on, and I looked at them both. We are not going to talk about money, I began, my voice steady. The money is a symptom. We are going to talk about respect. I turned to Chloe. You believe I am the past, an inconvenient relic. Let me tell you about that past. It was me and Richard, working 80-hour weeks, taking risks, building something from nothing, so our son wouldn't have to. It was me holding Mark's hand through fevers, cheering at his soccer games, and mourning with him when his father died. That past is the reason you are sitting in this house, driving that car, and had a future to plan at all. To dismiss it is to dismiss the very ground you stand on. Chloe scoffed. Oh, here we go, the martyr speech. No, I said, my voice cutting through her cynicism. The truth, a truth you have been willfully blind to. You saw me as an open wallet, not a person, not as Mark's mother or Leo's grandmother. I then turned to Mark. My heart ached looking at him, at the pain and confusion in his eyes. And you stood by and let it happen. Your silence was the deepest cut of all, Mark. It told her that her assessment of me was correct. It told her I was disposable. Your father would be ashamed, not of your financial struggles, but of your lack of character in that moment. The mention of his father hit him like a physical blow. He flinched, his eyes welling with tears. I know, he whispered, his voice cracking. Mum, I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I didn't want to fight with her. So you chose to let her fight with me instead, I asked. You chose peace in your marriage over your mother's dignity. That is not a sustainable choice, Mark. A partnership that requires you to sacrifice your family is not a partnership, it's a hostage situation. Chloe finally looked at me, her eyes flashing with anger. How dare you? You have no idea what our marriage is like. I know that it's a marriage that was solvent last week and is failing this week, I replied bluntly. That should tell you something. I am not the problem here. I am the mirror that is finally showing you the truth of your situation. I walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photo of Richard. I held it in my hands. This man worked himself into an early grave to give his family a better life. His past is in the very walls of this house. If you cannot respect that, then you don't deserve to live here. I put the photo down and walked to the door. The account will remain frozen. You two need to decide what kind of future you actually want to build. One based on reality, hard work and mutual respect, or one based on illusions that have now vanished. The choice is yours. As I left, I heard the first sound that wasn't anger or pleading. It was the sound of my son Mark, finally, truly, sobbing. The unraveling was painful, but it was necessary. Sometimes things have to fall apart completely before they can be rebuilt on a stronger foundation. The week after our confrontation was one of profound silence. No angry texts, no pleading calls. It was an unnerving quiet that felt different from the initial storm. It was the silence of contemplation, of a reality too harsh to ignore. I spent the time sorting through Richard's old workshop, a place I hadn't been able to touch for years. Surrounded by the scent of sawdust and old oil, I found a strange peace. I was rediscovering myself, the woman I was before I became the family's ever-present safety net. Then Mark called and asked if he could come over, alone. When he arrived, he looked thinner, tired, but there was a new clarity in his eyes. He wasn't the panicked boy from the grocery store or the broken man I'd left a week ago. He looked like a man who had been through a fire and come out the other side. We sat on the back porch, the same spot where I'd been enjoying my newfound peace. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched the bees buzzing around my lavender bushes. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he finally said, "about Dad, about you, about everything you said." He looked at me, his gaze direct and filled with a shame that was real and deep. "You were right, about all of it. I let Chloe's ambition and my own weakness dictate everything. I was so afraid of rocking the boat, I didn't realize I was letting it sink." He told me that after I left their house, he and Chloe had the biggest fight of their lives. But this time it was different. He didn't back down. He told her everything he was feeling, his shame, his complicity, his realization that their life was a facade. "I told her I had failed her too," Mark admitted, "by never being a true partner. I let her believe that this lifestyle was something we had earned, when I knew deep down it was a gift she and I took for granted." He said Chloe had broken down, not with angry tears, but with the quiet, desperate tears of someone whose reality has been shattered. Stripped of the financial security, she was forced to look at what was left, and it frightened her. "We're selling the house," Mark said, and the words stunned me into silence. "We can't afford it. We never could. We're going to use the equity you gave us, to pay off the credit card debt and find a small apartment we can actually afford on our own salaries. I'm picking up some freelance marketing work on the side. It's time I built something myself." This was more than I had ever expected. I wasn't trying to destroy their home, I was trying to save my relationship with them. But he had understood the deeper lesson. He was taking ownership. "And Chloe?" I asked, my voice gentle. He took a deep breath. "She wants to talk to you. She's humbled. I think she's finally seeing past the dollar signs. She's seeing a family she almost threw away." A few days later, Chloe came to my house, alone. She stood on my doorstep, looking small and uncertain, stripped of her usual armor of confidence and designer clothes. I invited her in, and we sat in my living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Her apology, when it came, was not eloquent or polished. It was halting, raw, and tearful. "I am so sorry, Helen," she whispered, twisting her hands in her lap. "You weren't the past. You were the only thing holding us together. I was so insecure, so desperate to feel like I had made it on my own, that I treated you like an obstacle instead of a gift. I was wrong, and I am so sorry." I looked at this young woman, who had caused me so much pain, and I saw not a monster but a person who was lost. In that moment, I chose to believe her. The resolution wasn't a magic wand. I didn't unfreeze the account and pretend nothing had happened. The foundation was broken, so we had to build a new one. I helped them find a good realtor and a lawyer to handle the sale of the house. I converted the original down payment I had given them into a formal no-interest loan, with a payment plan they could genuinely afford once they were settled. I unfroze the joint account long enough for them to transfer out the remaining funds that were from Mark's paychecks. Then we closed it forever, a symbolic end to an unhealthy dynamic. Months have passed. Mark and Chloe live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. It's a tight squeeze, especially with Leo's toys everywhere, but it's theirs. Mark is working harder than ever, and for the first time he seems truly proud of himself. Chloe took a course in business management and is now an assistant manager at a different salon, earning her promotions through hard work, not just ambition. Our relationship is different now. It's not based on financial dependency. It's quieter, more deliberate. I see them every weekend. Sometimes I babysit Leo, not because they expect it, but because I want to. Chloe and I talk. We are not best friends, and perhaps we never will be, but there is a respect that wasn't there before. A fragile but growing understanding. Sometimes when I'm watching Mark play with Leo in the park, I think about that single click, that moment of cold clarity. It felt like an ending, but it was a beginning. I reclaimed my dignity, and in doing so, I gave my son the chance to find his own. I am not their past or their future. I am simply a part of their lives, present and accounted for, on my own terms, and that is more than enough. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.